Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating to not only just to bring awareness to the realities complex trauma creates, but also to delve into its mechanisms and the understandings needed to build a really good foundation to heal. Now, in today's video, I want to start to explore the steps needed to make some real changes. And one of the most compromised aspects around traumatic experiences is our attachment. It's how we connect and interact with people. And any of you that have watched my videos earlier, my prior videos, know that in my belief, belonging is the only path to healing. To heal from trauma, we need to be safe. We need to be part of. We need to have this support base and this ecology of supportive experiences that will enable our body to release, process, and heal. So exploring attachment is a lot harder than most people will think because of what's involved. And how attachment starts from the moment we basically become a conscious being inside the womb. Usually around the second trimester, the developing fetus starts to become aware. We have basically a couple 100,000 motor neurons developed in our brain. And we're this individual developing in this environment, seeking to belong. We've inherited millions of years worth of structures, interpretations, and perceptions all around the belonging and the attachment process. Our nervous system, our endocrine system is all around this attachment process. And the moment we take our first breath, if that is disrupted and we are not allowed to do the belly crawl and latch on for the first feeding immediately post-birth before the umbilical cord is cut, our attachment process is disrupted and it has cracks in it. Now, if you're removed for adoption and placement, that's a whole different story. But those cracks, even in where the baby is very quickly placed on the mother, but there was interventions or there was a separation, those cracks over time become crevices. And that weakness in the body's ability to trust connection, should anything arise in that infant's, child's, adolescence, or adult life, that challenges all our perceptions of safe, which is what trauma does, those cracks become crevices and our ability to connect is compromised. And as connection and belonging is so critical in healing, we need to develop ways to bridge this gap, to relearn how to trust our connection. Now, when you start to look at attachment, I'm not going to get into all the attachment styles and attachment theory, and as I said in other videos, I believe Bowlby, for labeling was brilliant. For understanding the intricacies of attachment, they're way off. Purely because the assumptions around then, the assumptions still remain that an infant or a young child, they don't have a great cognitive capacity, especially around understanding attachment. But that's for other videos. Now, when we connect, if we really want to look into understanding the intricacies of attachment, when we connect, there's this to and fro. There's a reward process that our nervous system and our body goes through as the connection grows and deepens. We have the anxiety of a first interaction. Then when they just say, okay, use an attraction-based connection as an easy example, then that attraction starts to kick in. There's adrenaline, there's pheromonal exchanges, there's all these processes that on both sides of the interaction, there are reward for building and expanding that connection. It becomes an ingrained positive experience. Now, when you have attachment trauma, when, for regardless of how it occurred, those cracks add another barrier that blocks majority of, if not all of, those positive experiences. Where the anxiety of a first meeting doesn't evolve past an anxiety, doesn't evolve past threat assessment, doesn't evolve past humiliation and rejection and all these other emotions that are tied in. So there is no reward felt in the body. There's just a reinforcement of the self-loathing and all the consequences that trauma has created. All the consequences that attachment trauma and attachment dysfunctionality has created. Now, as an adult, we can sort of grasp that, and our cognitive brain kicks in, and we can kind of, diminish it to a degree. Well, most of us can. Some of us can't. But to a child, especially a young child, these effects, this lack of reward for connection in the body, creates such a barrier that it completely and fundamentally alters the development of that child. It affects education, it affects socialization, it affects goals, it affects every facet of that child's life. And as we see very commonly, children that have difficulties with connection and attachment are always the target of bullies, and are usually dismissed as difficult by teachers or as not engaging. And society tends to isolate, and it's just a continuous, repetitive, layer upon layer upon layer reinforcement of self-loathing. Now, those layers are what we need to unravel, understand, and work with if we want to heal attachment. Because we need to get to a place where we can create ecologies, physical experiences, not staged. To digress for a second, one of the more common ways in the accessible therapies when you're dealing with most forms of trauma, when they try to work with attachment, you go through these staged exercises, role playing and all these little exercises that in reality are demeaning, are humiliating. And the interactions are so staged that they don't touch what it is we actually need to work with in regards to healing trauma. And I don't mean to sound condescending to therapies, but in a therapeutic setting, it's almost impossible to work with attachment trauma because you cannot work within an ecology that you cannot control. And by the simple act of creating an ecology, you create this scenario of role-playing that doesn't work. Attachment is around felt sense, it's feeling, it's chemical and biological, it's not cognitive. That's one of the difficulties that mental health hasn't grasped. That for a human being, for a biological mammal, a herd species, attachment is biochemical, not cognitive. Going through a bunch of steps, and this is where all adoptees are experts at this, because our attachments are cognitive, and that's for the other videos on this channel, the adoption ones. But because we perceive attachment as a cognitive thing, one, it's the reason why we have the social difficulties we have now. Two, that's why we have the degradation in our societies we have now. And three, it makes it very, very hard to get the support we require to heal from trauma. Because to heal attachment trauma, we need to have physical positive experiences where we have the felt sense of being seen, being valued, being recognized, and being understood. If you stage those, you are not being seen, you are fulfilling a role. You are not being recognized, you're following instructions. You're not being understood because you're not doing what you naturally would do. You are doing steps that are instructions on a sheet of paper. And that's why it doesn't work. The only recommendation I can do in this component of healing trauma, and I will have to do a lot more videos on this, is become aware of your immediate surroundings in your core sanctuary, your core, the place you spend the majority of your time. And then we all have little interactions on a daily basis. And it is starting to pick and choose those little interactions and see them as opportunities to explore growing our understanding of how we respond when we connect or when we interact with people. And start to slowly build upon that as a resource for working more complicated processes down the road. But in the very beginning, you really need to get back to basics, how an infant learns attachment, how an infant explores attachment, in that very simple, very black and white, very basic, and then build from there. If we go into more complex situations, there are too many parameters, there are too many unknowns, and anxiety will be there to the degree that we cannot interpret. It will become the dominant sensation. We cannot interpret all the little nuances in those beginning steps, because that's where we need to start to change, to recognize those beginning steps and create an ecology, or be part of an ecology that we can grow and alter those first initial steps. Very, very difficult, which is why the therapeutic industry doesn't go there, because it's really not something that they're capable of doing. This is one of those too hard areas for an industry that requires, payment structures and cost management. But it is so critical. And this is one of my goals in this channel, is to fill in these huge gaps. And this huge gap, as I said, it comes down to ourselves doing the work for ourselves. And in that construct, as I said, it's getting to understand our little nuances to be able to intercede before we go into a negative response, and start to recognize opportunities, teach ourselves to recognize opportunities to take it into a more positive, a little by little by little. This is a baby step thing, a very baby step thing. But it helps to teach our body that we can move forward. So as I said, with attachment, it is all around the felt exchanges. I cannot emphasize that enough. And when we understand those felt exchanges, and we can create and recognize the opportunities for the felt exchanges to become positive, we can start to expand the ecologies to create more. As always, I love your guys' questions and comments and your feedback. And stay safe, be respectful, be kind, and I'll see you next time. Hope.